All right, welcome day 5 of 7 days and 7 ways to own your phone. We are well on our way.
You're doing great.
To reclaiming ownership of these devices. They came out in 2007. Think about that.
That's so crazy.
It's not really been that long in the grand scheme of things, and yet we can't imagine living life without them.
Yeah, I was just talking yesterday with Jonathan, and I don't think he hardly remembers having a phone that had a limit on the number of minutes you could talk to someone. I had forgotten about that. You remember, before they limited data, it was talk time.
Right, it's true. It's true, and
it's come a long ways.
Yeah, we actually are those parents who got our middle schooler her first phone, and it's a flip phone, and she has to do texting the old-fashioned way, which we think is a good exercise in this is the way we had to learn to text too. It's good for her, right? But anyways, here we are. At this point in 2021, as we're filming these, recognizing that I like this quote I read in, again, that book, Indistractable, when you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck, right? So there's this beauty to invention and innovation, but there's always a dark side or a downside to it too. And I think we're recognizing that there's some downside if we don't learn to leverage these as tools.
But that's the good news, right? Is that we can.
And we can, and we are. And we're well on our way. So here we are, day 5. We're going to take you through another feature that's built into the iPhone that really allows you to set kind of screen time parameters. And there's a few different aspects to that when you go to that area in your settings.
Yeah. So basically what you're doing is taking control of your apps and which apps you can use and when. So you're kind of holding yourself accountable, at least, by setting yourself some limits, which... we don't like limits in America. We don't, in America particularly, hey, don't try to fence us in, right? So, but in this case, we find that there's actually more freedom on the other side of those limits. So, one of the things you can do is set something they call downtime, so that this is, again, something you can schedule on your phone, kind of like Do Not Disturb. You can schedule it daily, but except this is actually even more customizable. So you can pick what days and times you want to have downtime from your apps. So then within that, you can also customize which apps you're wanting downtime from and which ones always need to be available. Like your phone, you probably want to be able to take a phone call, but maybe you don't need to get on Facebook.
Yeah, and that's tomorrow we're going to talk more specifically about social media. So it could be a little redundant here, but this is actually kind of, again, that first step, that first layer, specifically with an app like that, where if you just recognize I am scrolling a feed too much, and you don't even like it, you're at the point where it needs to shift. This is kind of a preset commitment that you can make to hold yourself accountable, to say, hey, after so many hours of this app, it just shuts down.
Yeah, so there's the downtime you can set, and then there's the limit, the time limit for certain apps. So if there's an app that you just get sucked in, you wanted to play one game, and next thing you know, you played 20. Or you wanted to watch one YouTube video, and then it said, oh, watch this one, watch this one, watch this one, and you're stuck with it. Or Netflix, maybe you watch videos on your phone, whatever. You can just set a limit, an amount of time each day.
Right.
That you can use that. So be generous with yourself, but just don't be crazy, right?
That's right. I'm kind of toggling back and forth between these two, but it's just the irony of we're setting downtime on our phone when in reality, it's because in our downtime now, we generally always go to our phone. Right. But probably if you're like us, there's things that we want to do in our downtime that actually aren't on our phones. It's just that these are so easy and appealing that it makes that just an instinctual go-to almost. But if you're a person who's saying, especially we're kind of in a new year and maybe I want to read more, or I want to get back into this hobby or this craft, or, adult coloring books or something, I don't know. Something that's not digital, then that's a great way to set downtime so that you can prioritize whether it is devotional time or maybe just something else you want to do in your downtime that's not on a screen.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where there's a lot of things like this, but you start adding up all the time that you spend scrolling or that you spend playing this game that's fun. And yeah, that's fine for a few minutes, but when you start adding up like significant time each day that you just get stuck doing it, it's depressing. Like none of us would say like, I would like to spend a few days of my life, doing this insane thing,
Right.
This year.
Right.
So.
Well, and that is another feature on that screen is where all of these settings are, is it will show you kind of your screen time and what you're spending on your screen. And
Yeah,
maybe
it
that's
does.
where you even set a goal and you go, this is my threshold. There's
Yeah.
no reason I need to be on
Right.
there at that point, and that helps you inform some of these settings.
So here's one of the things that gets me in trouble, and you had a good idea for dealing with this. So sometimes I'll set myself a time limit, but then I need to get into something or I want to get into something, and so then I'll hit the app, even though it's kind of faded out, and says time is out on it. I'll hit it anyways, and it gives me a set of options. It says, like your time limit's off on this, but it also gives me an option to ignore it. And if I hit that ignore, then it says, well, how long do you want to ignore it? Like a minute, 15 minutes, all day? And I can hit whichever one of those I pick, and then I just have to enter my passcode, and then I've got access. So you had an idea.
So let's talk about that, because that's, again, where we sometimes are giving different layers of like kind of
Yeah.
giving this analogy of doing surgery too, and so cutting deeper, right?
Yep.
Again, this is different for different situations and different people, but that is kind of a deeper cut that's available on this setting page within your phone, is to use a screen time passcode. And so a suggestion that is made, if you're really trying to fight phone addiction, as well as if there are impure things that you are doing on your phone. This is where this setting also is really valuable, and just setting up a deeper level of accountability. So you can use that screen time passcode, but instead of you creating the 4-digit code, you have your spouse create it, or a close friend or coworker or your roommate. And basically they know the 4-digit code, make sure they know it and don't forget it, because I've heard it's very difficult to get through the Apple security process if you don't remember your code. So make sure they're trustworthy, make sure they remember that 4-digit code. But the idea is that you can then, for instance, in your case, it would require Julie, like if you're like, okay, I really want 15 more minutes on this.
Yep.
Julie, could you please put my code in?
Can I please?
So she types the code in and you get your 15 extra minutes, right?
Yep, if I'm in good graces that day.
Right.
Yep. I'm always in.
But the other side of that, kind of the purity end of things, and just making sure that we're not allowing this to become a portal for things that are sinful or that we don't want in our lives. Again, that's where you can kind of determine which websites are, there's kind of that content blocker area. So like, I'm going to approve all of these websites. What are your most common websites or the places you want to surf?
Can always go.
And then if it's not on that approved list, it's going to require your ally, your spouse, your accountability partner, whoever it is, to put in that 4-digit code to allow you to go and search on a different website, or add another one that's in the approved list. So again, over time, that approved list can grow. It's going to be a little more inconvenient at first on the front end, but as you kind of learn which sites you do want access to, that gets a little bit more infrequent that you even need the person to put in their 4-digit code. Or a lot of sites now, websites, are linked to an actual app again. So not that we just cleaned out apps, but let's say like you don't need to go to ESPN.com. You can just have the ESPN app, and then you have access to that, and you're on Safari or your web browser less altogether.
Yeah, and I think some things like this, maybe it feels like that's kind of extreme. Like I think a lot of people, they hear that and they're like, really? I'm going to ask my spouse or my coworker or whatever, my roommate, to put this code in. It's too extreme. But I think that's one of the things, especially if you're dealing with, and be real with yourself about if you're dealing with an addiction where like you've tried the screen limit and you're still just pressing through and plowing through that barrier and you're putting in your passcode and doing it anyway. What would be insane in the extreme would be to continue in this pattern of unhealth and guilt and shame. Not worth it.
Yeah.
Not worth
It really is the courageous thing to do at that point. And again, the limit, I think you started by talking about not liking limits, but how actually on the other side of a healthy boundary is the greatest amount of freedom.
Yep.
And if you are addicted, whether it's to just an overuse of an app or to internet porn on your phone, you're not free, and you know that. You know the feeling of the bondage and the restriction in that, and so that's where it is a little extreme, but it'll be worth it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and to get biblical for a minute, the language around sin in the New Testament is extreme. It's like, put it to death. Right?
Yeah. Well, and okay, see, now we're on pastoral scripture mode. The one that just popped in my head is, in Hebrews about throwing off the sin that so easily entangles. And man, like this is with us, almost like an extra appendage on our bodies now. Talk about the ability for it to just easily entangle us, and it's designed. It's designed to entangle us. So we're getting untangled.
Yep. And that same passage, since we're getting past it, goes on to say, which has always been so convicting to me, is it says, you have not yet shed blood in your battle against sin, like Christ did that for us, and we're not willing to put in a boundary because it feels too extreme. It's like, okay, come on.
Yeah. All right, so we'll kind of walk you through what this looks like on that page, and then spend some time with that today, and just maybe even pray about it. Like, what is the level of limitation here that would be healthy for me at this point? Yeah. Okay, so these screen time parameters are all found in settings, and they're under the screen time section there. So again, you have your chart of the actual screen time, the average screen time you're spending by day, and then this is kind of the area where you go in for these different facets that we have been talking about. You've got your downtime section. So you can go into downtime. This is where you can customize by the day when you want to have downtime. So maybe you want to have a weekly Sabbath and you literally want a day where you are not on your phone. You could set that as Saturday or Sunday and make it the whole day. Or maybe it's just a certain window of time each day. Whatever, the beauty is you can customize that, or you can set it as an everyday schedule again, right? So you could stack some of these features. You can only set one recurring time for do not disturb, but you could do that for a window of time at work and then make downtime during your dinner time hour at home and just have that recur every day here in downtime. So maybe a way to kind of combine that. But you can set up your downtime and customize that. And then with app limits, remember here, you're selecting a specific app and then setting a limit on that. So here's some that are already set in this device. Safari, 15 minutes every day. So after 15 minutes, Safari is going to be inaccessible or shut down. Instagram, 10 minutes every day is allowed. Facebook, and a couple of others, 15 minutes every day. So you're selecting your app and then choosing the amount of time that you want to allow yourself to spend on that app on a given day. So you can add a limit. Those ones were already set and shows you what that looks like, but it'll pop up the list here. You choose your app, and then we'll set the parameters from there. Okay, and then There's the communication limits is similar. If you want to explore that, we didn't really talk a lot about that. That really actually shuts down texting and phone conversation capabilities after a certain period of time. But here's the deal that we were talking about then with a code and kind of taking it to that level. So you use screen time passcode. So you can set that code, and once you set that code, it's going to require a code to change any of the settings that you have created up here. You can't just override your preset limitations then without someone putting in that 4-digit code. So with the website aspect of it, that's under the content and privacy restrictions, and that's where you can go through and allow certain websites to be allowed and certain ones to not. And again, then it would be required the screen time passcode to surf an unapproved website. So there's quite a few features within screen time. Might take a little bit more time today to work through those, but I challenge you to do it. And again, even if you start just scheduling some downtime or app limits, that is a great start in this process.